We live in an age of endless information. Courses, books, podcasts, tutorials, masterclasses, million-dollar mentors, infinite advice. And yet people are still broke, still lost, still unfulfilled, still scrolling through motivation, thinking that knowing is the same as growing. But here's the truth. Most won't say out loud. Knowledge doesn't make you rich. Action does. Because knowledge is potential. Action is power. You can know every wealth principle. You can quote every thought leader. You can memorize every success strategy ever written and still fail, still be stuck, still be the most insightful person in the room who doesn't own the room. Because information isn't transformation. It's only the invitation. You don't get paid for what you know. You get paid for what you do with what you know. You get rewarded not for theory, but for implementation. This is the separation, the line between the talkers and the doers. Talkers say, I know that. Doers say, I live that. Talkers consume content. Doers create momentum. Talkers collect ideas. Doers collect results. Talkers think learning is progress. Doers understand. Learning without execution is spiritual entertainment. You can sit in seminars all year. You can fill journals with breakthroughs. You can be inspired every day of your life and still build nothing. Because action is the great separator. It's what builds the gap between potential and power, between motivation and mastery, between poverty and prosperity. The world doesn't pay you for your insights. It pays you for your impact. And impact requires movement, clarity, courage, commitment. That's why your life doesn't change when you hear something new. Your life changes when you do something different. And that's the real gap most never cross. They fall in love with consuming. They get addicted to information. They scroll, swipe, save, nod their heads and say, wow, but never move. They confuse stimulation for strategy. They chase the high of knowledge without building the habit of doing. And every day that passes without action is another day you've trained yourself to live on pause. Another day you've reinforced hesitation. Another day you've told your nervous system, thinking about change is the same as creating it. It's not. Change has never been about what you know. It's always been about what you practice. Because you don't rise to the level of your education. You rise or fall to the level of your execution. Every insight not applied becomes weight. It becomes pressure. It becomes guilt and regret and noise in your head that says, you should be further by now. And that voice, it's not wrong. You should be further because you've known better. You've read the books. You've taken the notes. You've sat in the silence and heard your calling echo inside you. But knowing better has never been the problem. Doing better is. Doing when it's inconvenient. Doing when no one claps. Doing when doubt is loud. Doing when no one is watching. Doing when you're tired or sore or scared. Doing when the outcome isn't guaranteed, but your standard is. Because the difference between the rich and the broke isn't access to information. It's the discipline to act on what they know. And not just act once, but act consistently, ruthlessly, relentlessly. While others are thinking, they're building. While others are analyzing, they're applying. While others are hesitating, they're moving one imperfect step at a time. Because success doesn't reward the best theory. It rewards the boldest action. And boldness isn't something you're born with. It's a habit. It's something you train when you stop negotiating with fear. When you stop hiding behind, I need more time, or I'm still researching. When you stop pretending that preparation is progress. Preparation without action is just procrastination with a halo. And you don't need more prep. You need more execution. Because the cost of inaction is not just delay, it's decay. Your gifts decay. Your confidence decays. Your clarity decays. Your identity decays. Until one day, you forget what it even felt like to move with certainty. And now you don't just lack results, you lack belief. That's what hesitation does. It doesn't just steal time, it steals who you could have become. But you can take it back, not by reading another book, not by watching another motivational clip, but by deciding right now that from this moment forward, you will not measure your growth by what you learn. You will measure it by what you do, because action is the only metric that matters. It's the only thing that builds skill. It's the only thing that creates momentum. It's the only thing that changes identity. It's the only thing that turns potential into proof. So act. While others think, act. While others stall, act. While others wait, act. And keep acting until the noise goes quiet, until doubt fades, until your feet move faster than your fear, until you look up one day and realize, I did not just learn this life. I built it, one action at a time. Because when you finally commit to action as a lifestyle, not an event, not a moment of motivation, not a phase, you begin to experience a new kind of power. A power that doesn't ask for permission. A power that doesn't wait for confirmation. A power that doesn't check the weather, the algorithm, or the applause. You become the cause, not the effect. You stop waiting for the conditions to be right because you understand conditions don't create creators. Creators create in spite of conditions. They move when the plan is fuzzy. They move when the critics are loud. They move when the market is unstable. They move because movement is their medicine, their message to the world that says, I don't need certainty. I need action. Because action breeds clarity. Action reveals character. Action sharpens direction. You don't discover who you are by sitting and thinking. You discover who you are by stepping into the unknown again and again and realizing you didn't die, you didn't break, you didn't disappear. You adapted. You grew. You became bolder, louder, sharper, clearer. And suddenly the knowledge you once stored in books and notebooks and highlights becomes muscle memory. You don't need to remind yourself of the lessons anymore. You are the lesson. Because action has written it into your DNA. You speak with weight not because of what you've read, but because of what you've lived. And the world feels it. People may not know what changed in you, but they can feel it. In your presence, in your posture, in your decisions, in your pace. Because people who live in action don't move like the rest of the world. They don't flinch. They don't fold. They don't fantasize. They build. They execute while others envy. They deliver while others discuss. They show up while others shrink. And their results are loud not because they talk about them, but because they no longer have to. Because here's what most people forget. The world listens to results, not excuses, not theories, not potential. Results. And results only come to those who move. So the question becomes, what are you delaying? What do you keep learning about but never living? What dream have you kept in theory? Because action would make it real. Because real is scary. Real means you might fail. Real means people might see you lose. Real means no more hiding behind one day. But real is where the rewards are. Real is where the freedom is. Real is where the wealth is. Real is where the life is. So stop aiming for perfect. Start aiming for proof. Because done is better than dreamed. Action is better than anticipation. And movement, even messy, is better than standing still. You will learn more by doing in one day than by thinking for a year. You will grow faster by executing the wrong plan than by perfecting the right one you never start. And you will build the life you say you want, not through intention, but through initiation. So initiate. Now, before you feel ready, before you're 100% certain, before the voice in your head talks you back into safety, Because action silences the voice. Action shuts down self-doubt. Action says to your fear, you had your time. I have work to do. And that's when everything shifts. Not because the world changed, but because you did. You stopped waiting. You stopped preparing. You stopped thinking about who you could be and started becoming it. And the distance between who you are and who you want to be, it's not measured in knowledge. It's measured in steps. So take one right now. Take the step that feels uncomfortable. Take the step that breaks your pattern. Take the step that doesn't guarantee applause, but guarantees growth. Because every step you take becomes evidence. And evidence becomes belief. And belief becomes momentum. And momentum, that's where the real acceleration happens. You don't need motivation when momentum takes over. You don't need pep talks when you've tasted progress. You don't need to be pushed when your own results start pulling you forward. But you won't get there by waiting. You won't get there by journaling about your potential. You won't get there by watching someone else live the life you've been dreaming of. You get there by starting and then not stopping. Because once you take one step, your next job is to take another and another and another until action is no longer a task. It's your identity. Because the person who builds wealth, freedom, power, peace, that person isn't more gifted than you. They just out-executed you. They weren't more worthy. They were just more willing to move without certainty. And that willingness, that's what you train. Every time you choose action over anxiety, every time you choose execution over excuses, every time you choose to start before you feel like it, you build that muscle. And that muscle compounds, it builds posture. You start walking taller, speaking clearer, deciding faster, leading without needing confirmation. Because now you don't need to be told what to do. You know what to do. You've lived it. You've earned it. You've felt it in your bones. And nothing, no comment, no setback, no delay can take that from you. You are no longer an observer of action. You are the source of it. You are the one others now watch. You are the one who moves first. You are the one who doesn't explain, doesn't overthink, doesn't wait for someone else to take the lead. You are the leader, and the leader always acts. Not because they're fearless, but because they refuse to be ruled by fear. Not because they're certain, but because they trust their capacity more than their conditions. Not because they're lucky, but because they built momentum while others waited for miracles. That's the edge. That's the gap. That's the reason 99% stay spectators while 1% step into stages, onto platforms, into power. Not because of what they knew, but because of what they did. So what will you do? Will you keep collecting information? Will you keep stacking knowledge? Will you keep convincing yourself that next month, next week, next season will be better timing? Or will you do the thing? Make the call. Send the email. Publish the post. Say no to the distraction. Say yes to the project. Launch the business. Start the routine. Build the offer. Open the document. Click the button. Take the meeting. Post the video. Write the page. Say the truth. Live the standard. Act. Because the longer you delay, the heavier it gets. The longer you hesitate, the further you drift from the version of you that could have built the life you were meant to live. But the second you move, the second you choose motion over maintenance, you reclaim all of it. You reclaim your edge. You reclaim your direction. You reclaim your destiny, not through knowledge, through action. Because once you move, you remember who you are. You remember that you were not made to collect wisdom and sit still. You were not made to stockpile potential and wait for permission. You were made to build, to break ground, to bring to life the fire that's been burning in your chest since the day you first dreamed something bigger. And the longer you ignore that fire, the more it turns into frustration. Not because you're incapable, but because you were never meant to live a life of theory. You were born to embody the result, to look around at your life and say, this, every bit of it, is what I created. This was once a thought in my mind. Now it's a fact in the world. Because I moved when others waited. I acted when others doubted. I walked when others watched. And the truth is, your life is already full of evidence. Everywhere you look, you're surrounded by the outcomes of past actions or past inaction. Your body, it reflects the habits you've honored. Your bank account, it reflects the decisions you've repeated. Your calendar, it reflects the standards you've enforced. Your relationships, they reflect the boundaries you've allowed. Nothing in your life is neutral. Everything is either a reward or a receipt. And that truth doesn't shame you, it empowers you. Because it means if you don't like what you see, you don't need a new life, you need new actions. Not more knowledge, not more advice, just more movement. Intentional, precise, repeated action built around the person you say you want to become. Not tomorrow, not after the next book, not once it's perfect. Now, because there is no perfect moment. There is no flawless strategy. There is no ready. There is only the person who acts and the person who doesn't. And the ones who act, they don't win because they have less fear. They win because they move in spite of it. Because action, especially imperfect action, doesn't just produce results, it destroys fear. Every time you take the step, even while trembling, you teach your nervous system, I move anyway. I build anyway. I lead anyway. And soon, the fear begins to fade. Not because it disappeared, but because it no longer decides for you. That's the shift. That's the rebirth. That's the moment you become dangerous, because now nothing stops you. Not the unknown, not the risk, not the rejection, not the waiting. You don't wait. You work. You execute. You build the muscle of follow-through. And that muscle, that's what wealth is made of. Because wealth is not a result, it's a rhythm. The rhythm of daily action. The rhythm of choosing movement over meaninglessness. The rhythm of walking the talk, not once, but always. And when your rhythm becomes consistent, your results become inevitable. That's when people call you gifted. That's when they say, you're lucky. You're built different. But you'll know the truth. You weren't gifted. You weren't lucky. You weren't chosen. You just moved. You chose action. And action chose you back. And when action chooses you back, something deeper happens. You stop questioning if you're worthy. You stop negotiating with your own potential. You stop explaining yourself to people who gave up on themselves. Because now, your confidence isn't a facade, it's earned. It's built from the trenches, from the late nights when you showed up anyway, from the early mornings when no one saw the work, from the days you didn't feel like it and still executed. This is the part where self-respect is born. When you no longer need to prove anything because you've proven it to yourself. And that's when you start building from power, not insecurity, not desperation, not neediness, but real, grounded, unshakable power. Because you've closed the gap between what you know and what you do. You've aligned your insight with your actions. And now every step reinforces your identity. Every win multiplies. Every habit stacks. Every day compounds. Because action has momentum on its side. And momentum doesn't care where you started. It doesn't care how long you waited. It doesn't care what your past looks like. It only cares about now. It only responds to movement. So move. Even if your voice shakes. Even if your hands tremble. Even if no one claps, no one sees, no one believes. Move because you believe. You believe in the law of the harvest. You believe in the power of sowing. You believe that the smallest consistent action will always outrun the grandest unexecuted idea. And when you believe that deeply, you become unstoppable. Not because the world changes, but because you do. You start acting like someone who doesn't break their own word. You start executing like someone who doesn't need hype to stay consistent. You start deciding like someone who trusts their future more than their feelings. And suddenly, knowledge isn't a weight. It's fuel. Because now it has somewhere to go. It's no longer stuck in your mind. It's moving through your habits, through your voice, through your work, through your results. And that's the moment everything shifts. Because now the world takes notice. Not because you shouted, but because you showed. Not because you posted, but because you performed. Not because you talked about the dream, but because you lived it step by imperfect step. And while others are still wondering, still waiting, still watching, you're walking, you're building, you're doing. And doing is what makes you rich. Not rich in theory, not rich in potential, rich in proof. Because proof is what the world pays attention to. Proof is what creates legacy. Proof is what inspires change. And proof only comes through action. So act. Again. Now. Always. Because when your life becomes a pattern of action, you stop chasing results, they start chasing you. Opportunities find you. People follow you. Doors open for you, not because of who you know, but because of what you've done. Because action is magnetic. It doesn't whisper. It commands. It tells the world, this is someone who moves. This is someone who doesn't just know, they embody. They don't just speak, they deliver. They don't just learn, they lead. And that's when everything changes. Not overnight, but undeniably. Because action rewires everything. It rewires your posture, your voice, your circle, your bank account, your confidence, your destiny. It separates you from the version of yourself that used to wait, the one that second-guessed, the one that kept researching, kept stalling, kept asking for one more sign. You no longer need signs. You are the sign. You no longer need more proof. You are the proof. Because now your life isn't built on hopes. It's built on habits. It's not sculpted by luck. It's carved by movement. And here's the final truth. The gap between where you are and where you want to be, it's not filled with information. It's filled with execution. You don't need another podcast. You don't need another guru. You don't need another course. You need to do what you already know. You need to trust the process you've been avoiding. You need to become the person you keep writing about, dreaming about, praying to become. And that person, they don't live in your thoughts. They live in your actions. So go. Move. Write the email. Make the call. Launch the idea. Wake up earlier. Train your body. Speak with certainty. Show up relentlessly. Do what scared you yesterday. Live like the future depends on today, because it does. This is your moment, not to learn more, but to act more, because knowledge doesn't make you rich. Action does. We glorify the leap. We romanticize the overnight. We worship the lightning strike. But the truth is built in the mud. In the mornings, no one claps for. In the evenings, you drag your dreams home and feed them discipline instead of excuses. In the days that look like nothing is changing, but everything is. Because real transformation is quiet. It doesn't scream, it shifts. It doesn't leap, it lifts. One rep at a time, one choice at a time, one small step at a time, done daily. And that's the part the world forgets to mention. The success story isn't written in the headline, it's written in the habits. Not in the big break, but in the small decision to not break, to not skip the work, to not give in to distraction, to not delay the goal just because the grind feels slow. Because the ones who make it, they don't jump higher. They just keep walking. While everyone else is waiting for permission, waiting for passion, waiting for the perfect plan, the walker keeps walking. And walking turns into winning. Not because they were lucky, but because they never left the path. And the path, it doesn't require genius. It doesn't require permission. It doesn't require a leap. It only requires the next small step. You want clarity? Start walking. You want confidence? Start moving. You want momentum? Take one step, then another. Don't try to build the entire house today. Lay one brick with precision, with patience, with presence. Then show up tomorrow and lay another. Because greatness is never built in the burst. It's built in the boring, in the discipline of doing what needs to be done, even when the feelings have left the room. Especially when the feelings have left the room. That's when it counts. When you keep going. When you keep showing up. When you stop needing hype and start living by habit. Because hype is a drug. But habit is the cure. And the habit of small steps done daily, done faithfully, done without applause, that's what creates a life so stable it looks like a miracle. But it's not a miracle. It's math. It's motion. It's your decision repeated enough times that the universe takes notice and says, they're ready. And until that day comes, you keep stacking. Keep moving. Keep choosing the next small step. Because no matter how far the journey looks, the only way forward is one step at a time. One step at a time. That's how giants are built. That's how dreams are shaped from shadows. That's how legacies are forged in the furnace of now. Not tomorrow. Not when you feel ready. Not when you have more time, more energy, more certainty. Now. Because the truth is, life doesn't reward the big leap. It rewards the small act of courage repeated daily. The kind of courage it takes to sit down and face yourself. To stay in the work when the results are still sleeping. To stop fantasizing about transformation and live it in real time with real sweat in the real world. That's how lives change. Not through inspiration, through implementation. And implementation doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to be present. It needs to exist. It needs to happen. Because every step you don't take is a vote for staying the same. But every step you do take, even the tiny, clumsy, quiet ones, is a vote for your future. That's what it means to live intentionally. To understand that momentum is not a gift from the gods, it's a byproduct of movement. And movement comes from the next small step. You want to write a book? Write one sentence today. You want to build a business? Make one call today. You want to be healthier? Drink one glass of water, take one walk, say no to one thing you normally cave to. Because that's how momentum begins. Not in force, in friction, in resisting the urge to delay, in leaning into the discomfort that says, this is unfamiliar, but it's necessary. Because discomfort is a doorway. And most people stand at the threshold for years, waiting for it to get easier. But those who win, they walk through. And they walk through not with a sprint, but with a step. One step, then another, until one day, the person they used to be can't keep up. Until one day, they look in the mirror and don't recognize the weakness anymore. Only strength, only steadiness, only proof that the smallest steps, done consistently, can outpace the biggest dreams that never left the notebook. This is how real change works. You don't change your life in one day. You change it in the same day, repeated 1,000 times, with intention. You wake up and walk forward, through fear, through fog, through failure, and you keep walking. Because that next step, it's not small, it's everything. It's everything because the next step is where the transformation begins. Not in thought, in motion. Because motion is magic. Motion is medicine. Motion is proof that you're no longer living at the mercy of someday. And if you keep moving, even when it's hard, even when it's hidden, you will become unstoppable. Not loud, not flashy, not viral, unstoppable. Because the person who shows up when it's boring, when it's heavy, when it's silent, wins. Wins not just the goal, but the identity. They don't just achieve more, they become more. Because each small step forward is a sculptor's strike against the marble of your old self. Every repetition is a chisel. Every tiny act of courage is a cut. And eventually, the noise of your excuses falls away. And what remains is a masterpiece forged in micro movements. A life not built in leaps, but in layers. Stacked, pressed, sharpened, and held together by nothing but relentless repetition. The world will tell you it's not enough. That one push-up doesn't matter. That one email won't change anything. That one page read is too small to count. But the disciplined know better. They know 1 becomes 2. 2 becomes 4. 4 becomes a rhythm. And rhythm becomes inevitable. Because when you take small steps every single day, your identity shifts. You start to trust yourself. Not because you're perfect, because you're present. And presence compounds. Confidence doesn't come from saying, I can. Confidence comes from proving to yourself, I do. Even when it's small. Especially when it's small. Because the small steps, they're the soul of the shift. They're the proof you're not a prisoner to your past. They're the proof you don't need permission to become legendary. You just need to keep stepping. Not when the music plays, not when the lights shine, but when the room is quiet, when no one knows your name, when it's just you, your breath, your focus, your promise, and your next step, because that's where greatness lives. Not in the leap, but in the step no one sees, taken again, and again, and again, until one day you don't even remember the version of you that hesitated. Because that version, the one who hesitated, who second-guessed, who postponed their greatness, that version is gone. Not by accident, not by force, but by daily replacement. Each small step became a vote against that old identity. Each quiet act of movement, no matter how ordinary it looked, was extraordinary in its effect. And eventually, that effect becomes undeniable. You don't just feel different, you are different. Because you didn't need a revolution to begin, you needed a rhythm of doing, a rhythm of becoming, a rhythm of saying, I am not here to perform, I am here to progress. That kind of rhythm silences the inner critic. That kind of rhythm builds trust in your reflection. That kind of rhythm erases the need for motivation because you no longer depend on emotion to act. You act because it's time. You act because it's aligned. You act because that's what disciplined people do. They move forward, regardless. And in that movement, in those repetitions, you discover something the world will never sell you. Freedom. Freedom from procrastination. Freedom from perfectionism. Freedom from the lie that your transformation must be big, loud, viral, and overnight. No, it just has to be daily. That's the blueprint. You don't need more inspiration, you need intention. You don't need more time, you need to decide. Decide that the next step matters. Decide that it's enough. Decide that the compound effect of your consistency is more powerful than the chaos of your past. Because the moment you decide and act, you've changed everything. Not because the step was big, but because you took it. And if you take it again tomorrow, and the next day, and the next, you will become someone your old self can no longer recognize. Someone who doesn't wait. Someone who doesn't flinch. Someone who doesn't fold when it's hard, but rises because it's hard. And one day, someone will ask you how you did it. How you got so clear, so strong, so steady. And you'll say, I didn't leap. I just took the next step. And then I never stopped.